April 14th, 1944. Silesian Coal Basin, occupied Poland. Tomasz Kowalski lies flat on his stomach at the edge of a ventilation shaft, 280 meters below ground, watching shadows move across the rock wall of the main haulage tunnel. The shadows belong to men. 60, maybe 70 SS soldiers from the 4th SS Polizei Panzergrenadier Division, moving in tactical formation through a tunnel that's supposed to be abandoned. They're carrying MP-40 submachine guns, stick grenades, and enough ammunition to hold a defensive position for days. What they don't know, what their commanding officer, SS Sturmbannführer Klaus Reinhardt, can't possibly know, as he leads his regiment deeper into the Wawel mine complex, is that they're walking into a trap designed by a coal miner who spent 23 years understanding ventilation systems, methane gas dynamics, and exactly how to make men believe they're moving toward safety when they're actually marching toward suffocation. Tomasz is 41 years old. His hands are scarred from decades of working coal faces. His lungs are damaged from breathing rock dust. Before the war, he was shift supervisor at Wawel mine, responsible for 340 miners extracting anthracite coal from seams 3 meters thick. He knows every tunnel in this complex, every shaft, every crosscut, every ventilation duct. He knows the geology, the fault lines, the pockets of methane that accumulate in dead-end workings. And for the past 6 weeks, he's been converting that knowledge into a weapon. The SS Regiment is fleeing. Soviet forces broke through German lines at Przemyśl yesterday, advancing faster than Wehrmacht command predicted. The 4th SS Polizei Division, tasked with holding the Silesian industrial region, is fragmenting under pressure. Most units are retreating west toward Germany. This regiment, approximately 850 men, received different orders. Reinhardt was commanded to establish a defensive position in the Wawel mine complex, using the underground tunnels as a fortified stronghold where they could resist Soviet advance while German forces regroup. It's a sound tactical concept. The mine offers protection from artillery and airstrikes, limited entry points that can be easily defended, and enough space to shelter hundreds of soldiers. Soviet forces would need to commit significant infantry to clear the tunnels, creating a costly urban combat scenario underground. The plan has one critical flaw. The mine only works as a fortress if the ventilation system functions properly. Without fresh air circulation, 850 men will consume the available oxygen in approximately 9 hours. After that, carbon dioxide accumulation and methane buildup will make the tunnels uninhabitable, fatal. The Germans know this. That's why Reinhardt's engineers spent 2 days inspecting the ventilation system before committing troops underground. They found it operational. Surface fans running, air shafts clear, ventilation ducts intact. They tested airflow at multiple points. Everything checked out. What they didn't find, what they couldn't detect without tearing apart every meter of ductwork, was Tomas's modification. A series of wooden stovepipe decoys installed throughout the ventilation system, creating false airflow readings while gradually redirecting fresh air away from occupied tunnels and venting it uselessly to the surface. The Germans think they're breathing mine air. They're actually breathing a slowly diminishing pocket of oxygen that will be exhausted by nightfall. Tomasz watches the SS soldiers pass below him. They look confident, organized, professional. They're setting up defensive positions at tunnel intersections, establishing a command post in the main chamber, stacking ammunition crates, preparing for a siege. They have no idea they're already dead. The only question is whether Tomasz's calculations are correct, whether the ventilation trap will work exactly as he designed it, or whether 850 SS soldiers will discover the deception in time to escape. Tomasz retreats silently through the darkness towards the surface access tunnel. He has 8 hours before the trap closes completely. 8 hours to seal the exits. 8 hours to make certain that when the SS regiment realizes they're suffocating, there's no way out. Understanding Tomasz's trap requires understanding mine ventilation, a technical discipline that kept European coal miners alive for 2 centuries. The principle is simple: fresh air in, stale air out. The execution is complex. Mines are 3-dimensional mazes of tunnels, shafts, and workings extending kilometers underground. Without forced ventilation, air stagnates. Carbon dioxide accumulates. Methane, the invisible killer, builds up in pockets. Miners suffocate or explode in fireballs when methane reaches ignition concentration. The Wawel mine complex, developed between 1897 and 1923, uses a standard ventilation design for deep coal mines. 2 vertical shafts connect the surface to the underground workings. The intake shaft, 340 meters deep, brings fresh air down. Surface-mounted electric fans create negative pressure, pulling air into the mine. The exhaust shaft, 380 meters deep, vents stale air out. The same fans that pull fresh air in push contaminated air up. Between intake and exhaust, a network of ventilation ducts routes air through the working areas. Main haulage tunnels, where coal cars travel, get priority airflow. Branch tunnels, where miners cut coal, receive ducted air through fabric or metal tubes suspended from the ceiling. Crosscuts connect different levels, allowing air circulation. Regulators, simple doors or dampers, control airflow direction and volume. The system works because it's designed as a complete circuit. Fresh air enters, travels through every working area, picks up carbon dioxide and methane, and exits through the exhaust shaft. Break the circuit anywhere, and portions of the mine become unventilated dead zones. This is how miners die. A collapsed tunnel blocks airflow. A forgotten door stays closed. A vent duct gets damaged. Sections of the mine go stale. Carbon dioxide levels rise above 5%, the threshold where human cognitive function degrades. Above 10%, unconsciousness occurs. Above 15%, death follows in minutes. The Germans checked the circuit when they inspected the mine on April 12th. A 4-man engineering team, led by Oberscharführer Ernst Wöber, descended into the mine with anemometers, instruments that measure air velocity. They tested airflow at 23 locations throughout the complex. Every test showed adequate ventilation. Air moving at 1.5 to 2.0 meters per second, sufficient for the number of men they planned to garrison underground. What Weber's team measured was real airflow. They weren't fooled by broken instruments or manipulated readings. The air was genuinely moving at the specified rates, but they didn't understand where that air was going. Tomasz had spent 6 weeks ensuring the ventilation system appeared operational while actually being catastrophically compromised. The modification centered on stovepipe decoys, false ventilation ducts that looked identical to functional ones, but routed air uselessly. Tomasz fabricated these decoys from wood, using pine boards milled to precise dimensions, joined with hidden nails and carpenter's glue. Each decoy section measured 30 centimeters square, matching the standard ventilation duct size used throughout the mine. He stained the wood with coal dust and oil, giving it the appearance of decades-old installation. The critical innovation was making the decoys indistinguishable from real ducts without destructive inspection. Tomas studied the original ventilation plans archived in the mine office. He identified 47 locations where ducts passed through areas rarely inspected. Storage chambers, abandoned workings, sealed sections condemned after methane incidents. At each location, he installed his wooden decoys parallel to the real ducts. The real ducts continued to function, carrying air exactly as designed. The decoy ducts did nothing. They were open at both ends, creating the appearance of continuous airflow, but they routed air from one empty chamber to another empty chamber. Pointless circulation. Then Tomasz modified the junction points where these ducts connected to the main ventilation circuit. He installed hidden dampers, simple wooden plates that could be rotated to redirect airflow. In the closed position, the dampers blocked the real ducts and opened the decoy ducts. Air that should have ventilated occupied tunnels instead circulated uselessly through abandoned sections before venting to the surface. When Weber's engineering team tested airflow on April 12th, the dampers were in the open position. The real ducts were functional. The decoys were inactive. Weber measured genuine ventilation and reported the system operational. After the Germans left, Tomasz spent April 13th repositioning every damper. By the morning of April 14th, when the SS Regiment began moving into the mine, the ventilation circuit was reversed. Fresh air from the intake shaft was being routed through the decoy system, circulating through empty tunnels and exhausting to the surface without ever reaching the occupied areas. The Germans were breathing residual air, the oxygen already present in the tunnels when they entered. That reservoir would sustain 850 men for approximately 9 hours. After that, carbon dioxide accumulation would become critical. After 12 hours, methane from the coal seams would begin accumulating. After 15 hours, the atmosphere would be lethal. The genius of Tomasz's system was its subtlety. The Germans could feel air movement. Breezes still circulated through the tunnels because the fans were running and the ducts appeared connected. But the air they were breathing was stale, endlessly recirculating through the occupied sections, gradually becoming more contaminated. By the time they realized something was wrong, by the time carbon dioxide symptoms appeared, headaches, dizziness, confusion, it would be too late to diagnose the cause. The ventilation system looked operational. The fans were running. The ducts were in place. Nothing appeared damaged or sabotaged. Tomasz's inspiration came from his father, Jan Kowalski, who died in the Wawel mine disaster of 1921. A ventilation failure caused by a collapsed regulator door trapped 43 miners in a dead-end working. They suffocated before rescue crews could reach them. Jan Kowalski was one of them. Tomasz was 8 years old. He remembered the funeral, 43 coffins in the village church, the priest saying it was God's will. Even then, Tomasz knew better. It wasn't God's will. It was failed engineering, and engineering could be manipulated. Tomasz emerges from the mine at 0847 hours. The surface facility is abandoned. The Germans evacuated all Polish workers before moving their troops underground. The only people at the site are Wehrmacht guards, 8 soldiers stationed at the main shaft entrance. They recognize Tomasz. He's been working as a liaison, helping the German engineers understand the mine layout. The guards think he's a collaborator. They let him pass without questioning why he's leaving. Tomasz walks 200 meters to the ventilation fan house, a concrete structure containing the electric motors that drive the mine fans. The motors are running, creating the negative pressure that pulls air through the system. He enters the building, signs the inspection log like he's supposed to, and performs a routine check of the motor bearings. Everything is functioning normally. The fans are pulling 340 cubic meters of air per minute through the mine, more than sufficient for 850 men, if that air was reaching them. He leaves the fan house and walks toward the tree line. Behind him, 280 meters underground, SS soldiers are establishing defensive positions, completely unaware that the air they're breathing is slowly killing them. Tomasz reaches the forest, finds the trail he's been using for 6 weeks, and begins the 8-kilometer walk to the Soviet forward position at Kurzanov. He needs to find whoever's commanding the Red Army advance and explain that the SS regiment occupying Wawel mine will be unconscious by nightfall. No shots fired, no casualties, just atmospheric chemistry and a ventilation system that looks functional but isn't. Born January 7, 1903, in the mining village of Berzezinka, Tomasz Kowalski grew up breathing coal dust. His father, Jan, worked underground his entire adult life. His grandfather died in a methane explosion at the Brzezince mine in 1891. The Kowalski family existed to extract coal from the earth. It was the only economy in Silesia that mattered. By age 12, Tomasz was working as a trapper, operating ventilation doors that controlled airflow in the tunnels. It was the lowest job in the mine hierarchy, given to boys too young for harder labor. Tomasz spent 10-hour shifts sitting in darkness, opening and closing a wooden door, whenever coal cars needed to pass. The job was monotonous, but it taught him how air moved underground. He felt it. Cold drafts when the door opened, stagnant warmth when it closed. He learned that ventilation wasn't automatic. It required constant attention, careful management, understanding of how air pressure and temperature created flow. At 16, after his father's death, in the 1921 disaster, Tomasz transferred to ventilation maintenance. He cleaned ducts, repaired leaks, replaced damaged sections. By 20, he was a ventilation technician, working directly under the mine's chief engineer. By 30, he was shift supervisor for the entire ventilation system, responsible for keeping 340 miners breathing properly across 3 shifts. Tomasz never received formal engineering education. Everything he knew came from experience, from watching, from making mistakes, and learning why they killed people. In 1929, a methane explosion in Level 4 killed 7 miners. Tomasz investigated and discovered a blocked vent duct had allowed methane to accumulate. He redesigned the duct routing to include redundant pathways. In 1933, 3 miners suffocated in a dead end working. Tomasz found that a regulator door had been left closed accidentally. He implemented a mandatory inspection protocol. By 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, Tomasz Kowalski was one of the most experienced ventilation specialists in Silesia. The Germans recognized this. When they occupied the region and seized the coal mines as critical industrial assets, they kept Polish technical staff working. They needed the coal. They needed the expertise. Tomasz stayed because leaving meant his family starved. For 5 years, Tomasz worked under German supervision, maintaining the ventilation systems that kept German-managed mining operations running. He watched Polish miners die from overwork, malnutrition, and industrial accidents the Germans didn't bother preventing. He watched families evicted from company housing to make room for German administrators. He watched the SS execute suspected resistance members in the village square. And he waited. The opportunity came in February 1944. when Soviet forces began their winter offensive. The front lines were moving west. German forces were retreating, but slowly, contesting every kilometer. Polish resistance groups, emboldened by the approaching Red Army, began sabotage operations. The Germans responded with mass reprisals. On February 19th, SS troops rounded up 47 men from Berzezinka, accused them of supporting partisans, and executed them in the mine yard. Tomasz's brother, Piotr, was among them. Piotr wasn't a partisan. He was a schoolteacher who complained too loudly about German ration policies. After the execution, Tomasz made a decision. He was going to kill Germans, not with guns or bombs. He didn't have access to those. He was going to kill them with engineering. With ventilation systems they trusted and didn't understand. He began planning in early March. The tactical situation was clear. Soviet forces were advancing towards Silesia. German forces would attempt to establish defensive positions using whatever infrastructure was available. The Wawel mine complex was the most fortified structure in the region. 280 meters of rock, providing protection against artillery and airstrikes. If the Germans retreated to defensible positions, they would use the mine. Tomasz needed to make that choice fatal. The first challenge was understanding how the Germans would use the facility. Tomasz requested a meeting with the German mine administrator, Bergrat Heinrich Schiller, on March 8th. He explained that the ventilation system required comprehensive inspection before any extended occupation. If troops were stationed underground, airflow requirements would increase dramatically. Equipment needed maintenance. Ducts needed cleaning. Schiller authorized the work. He gave Tomasz access to every tunnel in the complex, provided 2 assistants, Polish miners Tomasz trusted, and allocated 6 weeks for the project. The Germans thought they were getting a maintained ventilation system. They were funding their own deaths. Tomasz began fabricating the stovepipe decoys on March 10th. He worked in an abandoned surface workshop, using timber salvaged from condemned mining structures. The wood needed to be old, weathered, identical in appearance to the original ventilation ducts installed decades ago. Fresh lumber would be obvious. Tomasz found what he needed in a collapsed storage shed, pine boards that had been exposed to coal dust and moisture for 30 years. He cut the boards to precise dimensions using a handsaw. Power tools would have been faster, but power tools made noise that attracted attention. Everything had to appear routine. Just an old miner repairing ventilation equipment like he'd done for 20 years. Each decoy section required 4 boards, joined at right angles, to create a square duct 30 centimeters on each side. The joints had to be tight. Air leaks would reduce the effectiveness of the deception. Tomasz used a technique he'd learned from his father. Instead of visible nails, he drilled small holes and used wooden dowels to pin the boards together. Then he reinforced the joints with hide glue, the same adhesive used in original mine construction. The result was a duct section that looked hand-built by carpenters in 1920. He stained each section with a mixture of coal dust, linseed oil, and rust scraped from old rail cars. The patina was perfect, indistinguishable from genuine aged wood. By March 31st, he'd fabricated 94 decoy sections, totaling 282 meters of false ductwork. His assistants, Jerzy and Stefan, helped him transport the sections underground under the pretense of replacing damaged ventilation components. The German supervisors never questioned it. Ventilation maintenance was technical work, beneath their attention, as long as the system kept functioning. Installing the decoys required precision timing. Tomasz needed to place them in locations where German inspectors would see them and assume they were functional, but where they wouldn't actually connect to the occupied tunnels. He studied the mine plans obsessively, identifying the routes German forces would most likely use if they garrisoned troops underground. The main haulage tunnel on level 3 offered the most space, could accommodate hundreds of men, and had multiple defensive positions. The Germans would use that level. Tomas installed his decoy system to ventilate everywhere except level 3. The decoys ran through levels 1, 2, 4, and 5, through abandoned workings, through sealed sections, through storage chambers. They looked like a comprehensive ventilation network. They moved air continuously, but none of that air reached the places where soldiers would actually be stationed. The damper system was the critical component. Each junction where a real duct and a decoy duct intersected required a mechanism to redirect airflow. Tomas designed simple rotating plates, wooden discs mounted on iron rods, that could be turned to block one duct and open another. In the maintenance position, the real ducts were open and the decoys were closed. In the sabotage position, the decoys were open and the real ducts were blocked. He installed 23 dampers throughout the system, each one hidden inside a junction box that looked like standard ventilation equipment. The Germans would need to disassemble the junction boxes to find the dampers, and if they did disassemble them, they'd see wooden plates that appeared to be flow regulators, standard components in any mine ventilation system. Nothing would appear suspicious unless someone understood exactly how the entire system was configured. By April 11th, the installation was complete. Tomas had created a ventilation system that could be switched between functional and lethal with a few hours of work. He tested it on April 12th, the day before the German engineers conducted their inspection. He set all dampers to the maintenance position, ensuring the real ducts were operational. Then he walked through level 3 with an anemometer, measuring airflow. Everything registered normal. Air velocity, 1.8 meters per second. Adequate for several hundred occupants. That evening, after the German engineering team left, Tomasz, Jerzy, and Stefan repositioned every damper to the sabotage position. The work took 3 hours. They moved methodically through the mine, turning each damper plate 90 degrees, redirecting airflow from real ducts to decoy ducts. By midnight, the ventilation system looked operational, but was functionally useless for anyone occupying level 3. On April 13th, German military convoys began arriving at the mine. Wehrmacht trucks, followed by SS vehicles, bringing equipment, ammunition, and the first advance units of the 4th SS Polizei Panzergrenadier Division. Tomas watched from the surface as soldiers unloaded supplies and established a perimeter. By evening, approximately 200 SS troops had moved underground, securing the main tunnels and preparing defensive positions. On April 14th, the main body of the regiment arrived. Sturmbannführer Reinhardt established his command post in the level 3 main chamber, a large excavated space that once served as an underground maintenance facility. By 0800 hours, 850 SS soldiers were underground, spread across 2 kilometers of tunnels, believing they occupied an impregnable fortress. Tomas descends the access tunnel one final time at 0915 hours. He tells the Wehrmacht guards he needs to check the ventilation system, routine maintenance. They let him pass. Underground, he moves carefully through the darkness, following routes he's memorized over 23 years. He can navigate the mine blind, using only sound and touch. He reaches the junction box on level 2, the primary control point for the damper system. The box is mounted on the tunnel wall, secured with 4 bolts. Tomas opens it quietly, checking the damper position. The wooden plate is rotated fully, blocking the real duct and opening the decoy. Perfect. He closes the box and moves to the next checkpoint. At each location, he verifies the damper configuration. He's checking his work, making certain nothing has shifted, ensuring the trap is set exactly right. By 10:30 hours, he's confirmed all 23 dampers are positioned correctly. The SS Regiment is breathing residual air. Oxygen consumption has begun. Tomasz calculates the timeline using formulas he's memorized from ventilation engineering textbooks. 850 men, moderate physical activity, breathing approximately 0.5 cubic meters of air per hour each. Total consumption, 425 cubic meters per hour. The occupied sections of Level 3 contain approximately 8,500 cubic meters of air. At current consumption rates, oxygen concentration will drop from 21% to 17% in 8 hours. At 17%, cognitive function degrades. Men become tired, confused, irritable. At 15%, reached after approximately 10 hours, unconsciousness begins. At 12%, reached after 12 hours, death. But the calculation isn't linear. As oxygen decreases, carbon dioxide increases. CO2 is the real killer. At 5% concentration, severe headaches and dizziness occur. At 10%, unconsciousness. At 15%, death within minutes. The confined space of Level 3, with 850 men exhaling CO2 continuously, will reach dangerous CO2 levels before oxygen depletion becomes critical. Tomasz estimates the regiment has until 1900 hours, approximately 10 hours from now, before symptoms become severe. By 210 hours, mass unconsciousness will begin. By midnight, anyone still in the tunnels will be dead. He surfaces at 10:47 hours. The Wehrmacht guards are smoking cigarettes, paying no attention to him. He walks to the administrative office, signs out of the facility, and leaves through the main gate. Nobody stops him. Why would they? He's just a Polish miner, a collaborator who maintains their equipment. Tomasz walks 8 kilometers northeast toward Kurzanów. The route takes him through forest and farmland, avoiding German checkpoints. He knows the terrain. He's been walking these paths since childhood. By 13:15 hours, he reaches the outskirts of Kurzanów. The town is burning. Soviet artillery has been shelling German positions since morning. He can hear tank engines, the distinctive sound of T-34s, somewhere to the east. He finds a Soviet patrol at 13:40 hours, 3 Red Army soldiers clearing abandoned buildings. They're young, maybe 20 years old, wearing poorly fitting uniforms. They raise their weapons when they see him. Tomasz raises his hands, speaks in Russian, broken but intelligible. He learned it from Soviet POWs who worked in the mine in 1942, before the Germans transferred them elsewhere. I have information. German troops, underground, in the mine. Need to speak to commander. The soldiers look at him suspiciously. One of them, a sergeant with a scarred face, asks, "What mine? How many Germans?" "Wawel coal mine, 8 kilometers southwest. Maybe 850 SS soldiers. They think they're safe underground. They're not. The air is poisoned." The sergeant doesn't understand. Poisoned? Gas attack? No gas. The ventilation system is sabotaged. They're suffocating. By tonight, they'll be unconscious. Maybe dead. You can capture them without fighting. The sergeant stares at him for a long moment, then makes a decision. "Come with us. You'll tell this to the captain." They walk through Kurzanov to a commandeered house serving as a forward command post. Inside, chaos. Officers shouting orders, radio operators relaying messages, maps spread across tables. The sergeant finds a captain, explains the situation. The captain, a Georgian named Grigory Beridze, listens with growing interest. "You're telling me an entire SS regiment is trapped underground, suffocating?" "Yes, comrade captain. I worked in the mine. I sabotaged the ventilation. They think they're breathing fresh air. They're not. By tonight, they'll be dead or unconscious." Beridze studies Tomasz carefully. "Why should I believe you? You could be leading us into an ambush. Then send a reconnaissance team. Wait outside the mine. Watch. If I'm lying, you lose nothing. If I'm telling the truth, you capture 850 SS soldiers without firing a shot." Beridze considers this. The tactical situation is favorable. Soviet forces are advancing rapidly. German resistance is fragmenting. But 850 SS troops, even in retreat, represent a significant threat. If they're genuinely trapped underground, eliminating them would be a strategic victory. How long until they're unconscious? 6 hours, maybe 7. Depends on their activity level. If they're digging fortifications, working hard, they'll consume oxygen faster. Beridze makes his decision. "We go. You'll guide us to this mine. If you're lying, I'll shoot you myself." By 1445 hours, a Soviet motorized rifle company, 120 soldiers, mounted in trucks and supported by 3 T-34 tanks, is moving southwest toward the Wawel mine. Tomas rides in the lead vehicle, sitting between 2 Red Army soldiers who watch him constantly. The column moves carefully, avoiding main roads where German forces might have established ambushes. They reach the forest overlooking the mine at 1620 hours. Beridze orders his forces to take positions in the tree line, surrounding the mine facility. He sends a reconnaissance team, 6 soldiers, to observe the surface installation. They report back within 20 minutes. "Comrade Captain, minimal security. 8 Wehrmacht guards at the main shaft entrance. Ventilation fans running. No signs of alert." Beridze turns to Tomasz. "Your sabotage. Can the Germans detect it?" "Not easily. The system looks operational. The fans are running. Air is moving. But the air isn't reaching them. They won't understand what's wrong until symptoms appear. And by then, they'll be too confused to diagnose the problem." "When will symptoms appear?" Tomasz checks his watch. 1,635 hours. The SS regiment has been underground for 8 hours. Soon. Maybe they're already feeling it. Headaches, fatigue, dizziness. They'll think it's stress, exhaustion. They won't realize it's carbon dioxide poisoning until it's too late. Beridze orders his forces to wait. No assault, no engagement, just observation. If Tomasz is correct, the Germans will reveal themselves through their behavior. If he's lying, Soviet forces will assault at nightfall. The waiting begins. Underground, 280 meters below the surface, SS Sturmbannführer Klaus Reinhardt is experiencing his 3rd headache of the day. It started around 1400 hours. A dull pressure behind his eyes. He attributed it to stress. Commanding a regiment in retreat, establishing defensive positions under time pressure, dealing with inadequate intelligence about Soviet force movements. Headaches are inevitable. But now, at 1640 hours, the headache has intensified. His vision is slightly blurred. He feels nauseous. And he's noticing that many of his men look similarly affected. Soldiers are sitting when they should be working. Some are lying down, claiming exhaustion. One soldier vomited in the tunnel. Another complained of chest pain. Reinhardt's adjutant, Obersturmführer Hans Brandt, approaches looking pale. Herr Sturmbannführer, we have a problem. 27 men reporting illness. Headaches, dizziness, nausea. I think we have an epidemic. Epidemic? Reinhardt's voice sounds strange in his own ears, slightly slurred. What kind of epidemic causes symptoms in 8 hours? I don't know, sir, but it's spreading. More men are reporting sick every hour. Reinhardt tries to focus. His thoughts feel sluggish, delayed. Carbon dioxide. The word surfaces from his military training. Enclosed spaces. Poor ventilation. But that's impossible. The engineers inspected the ventilation system. It was operational. Check the air, Reinhardt orders. Send someone to measure airflow. Brandt dispatches a soldier with instructions to report back immediately. The man returns 15 minutes later, moving slowly, holding on to the tunnel wall for support. Herr Sturmbannführer, I checked the main duct. Air is moving. The system is working. I don't understand why. The soldier collapses, just falls forward onto the tunnel floor. 2 men rush to help him. One of them staggers, catches himself. Reinhardt feels panic rising through the fog in his mind. Something is catastrophically wrong. The ventilation system appears functional, but his men are collapsing. He's commanded troops in Russia, in Yugoslavia, in Italy. He's seen combat exhaustion, disease, chemical weapons. This is different. This is atmospheric. Evacuate, Reinhardt says. His voice sounds distant. Order all units to evacuate immediately. Everyone to the surface. Brandt moves to relay the order, but he's moving too slowly, like he's underwater. The command takes 5 minutes to disseminate through the regiment. Radio communications are functioning, but the operators are struggling to maintain coherence. Messages are garbled, repeated, confused. By 1710 hours, SS soldiers throughout Level 3 are attempting to reach the surface. But 850 men, moving through tunnels designed for mining crews of 50, creates immediate congestion. The main access tunnel, the primary route to the surface, is 2.3 meters wide. Men are packed shoulder to shoulder, shuffling forward in darkness, illuminated only by electric work lights strung along the walls. The movement generates more CO2. Physical exertion increases respiration rates. 850 men breathing heavily in confined space accelerates atmospheric degradation. Carbon dioxide concentration, already at dangerous levels, climbs rapidly. Men at the rear of the evacuation column, furthest from any fresh air, begin losing consciousness. They collapse in the tunnel. The men behind them try to help, but they're also affected. Soon, bodies are blocking the passage. Near the front of the column, soldiers reaching the junction point where the access tunnel meets the main shaft find Wehrmacht guards blocking their path. The 8 surface guards, following their orders to maintain security, initially refused to let the entire regiment evacuate without proper authorization. By the time they understand the situation is by dawn on April 15, 1944, Soviet forces enter the Wawel mine and find 850 SS soldiers unconscious or dead in the tunnels. And Tomasz Kowalski, standing at the sealed entrance with a wrench in his hand, becomes the only man in the war to capture an entire regiment using nothing but wooden stovepipes and 30 years of knowing exactly how men breathe underground.